You already know what time it is. Welcome back into the NFL with AJL, episode 97. We are live on a Friday. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're right here tapped in with us on the show. We got a packed one for you tonight, but of course, before we get started, hope you've had a blessed week so far. It's only been a few days since we've been live here on the show. Hope you've been soaking up a ton of NFL free agency news as we've got the NFL draft unfolding, players bouncing around, and plenty of activity within the league itself. Of course, before we get started, y'all, please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you may be watching. Subscribe on YouTube so you never miss a post. Hit the bell to get notified as well. Of course, at the NFL or at NFL with AJL on all social media platforms. If you can't find me, you're simply not looking hard enough. As always, thank you for the support on social media as we continue to grow the show and the podcast. Same difference there every single day. As you see, I got Marcus on the show with me. Not the first time. Hasn't been a long time because he wasn't on not too long ago. Welcome in, man. How are you doing?
I'm feeling good, man. How you feeling, bro? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. It's good to have you. I'm feeling good too, man. We got a packed show for the folks. Like we said, let's give you a little bit of the rundown. NFL free agency grades part 2. The top 5 NFL draft quarterbacks. The Eagles and the 49ers are losing players like crazy, it feels like, in the middle of NFL free agency. Then at the end, I'll have Marcus pop out so we can pop into the Who Dat corner, give you some Saints free agency updates and a little more about what's going on with the team there. So let's take it right off the top, man, as we have grading NFL free agency moves part 2. The Eagles trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson and a 6th round pick to the Texans for Kenyon Green and a 5th rounder. Give me a grade in totality if you want, maybe one for both sides, because I thought this was really interesting considering how C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a big part, or was now twice a big part of that Eagles Super Bowl defense.
I like the move for the Texans. Obviously, you're bringing in a veteran, a Super Bowl champion, a player who's been to the Super Bowl twice now in the last 3 years. Adding him to a secondary that obviously has Derek Stingley Jr., a defense that obviously has Will Anderson as well. I like the move for the Texans. I don't mind it for the Eagles, right? I know we'll talk about the Eagles a little bit more, that they have a lot there defensively, right? Where you look at a loss of a player like C.J. Gardner-Johnson and you think it might not be the end of the world. So if I had to put a grade on it, I would give it a C plus with an asterisk for the Eagles and a B minus for the Texans.
Seems like we're fairly close. I'm going to go with D for the Eagles only because of how great C.J. Gardner-Johnson really was for them, in the Super Bowl run. They were actually finally able to win the Super Bowl the second time around that he was with the team as well. And when you just look at what C.J. Gardner-Johnson was able to provide, I mean, graded 21st overall out of almost 200 safeties, 8th in coverage grade, 3rd in INTs, 5th in pass breakups. He was a big, like I said, heart and soul of that defense, a big-time trash talker. And, as my Saints drafted him and he came out of Florida in college, I was like, I really like this guy. And I was blown away when we ended up trading him to the Eagles, And then when you take a look at, how Kenyon Green, because the picks really kind of swap out, right? You have a 5th rounder traded for a 6th rounder. So Kenyon Green has a 39 overall grade as a lineman, a 40 pass blocking grade, and a 45 run blocking grade. That grade's very low for a lot of the offensive linemen in the NFL. And speaking of grades, we're talking about PFF here. So he's really just not a good defensive lineman, or offensive lineman, excuse me. I'm going to go a D for the Eagles, and I'm going to go an A for the Texans because they ship out, an offensive lineman that's not really that great for them, and they bring in a stud safety, one of the better ones in the league, in CJ. The Ravens pick up DeAndre Hopkins.
My friends will tell you I hate the Ravens. I don't hate the Ravens, but this doesn't move me. This isn't a needle moving move for me because at the end of the day, I think we're past the point with the Baltimore Ravens where we grade their success based on how they play from September to the first half of January, right? Like we judge their success based on the success of Lamar Jackson in the postseason. And I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins at this point in his career is going to be a needle mover for Lamar Jackson individually as a playoff performer. Right. When it comes time to matching up against the Josh Allens, the Joe Burrows, and the Patrick Mahomes, obviously, of the world. Also, you take a look at a guy like C.J. Stroud, who, hopefully, assuming his wide receiver core is healthy next year, could be a little bit better. Justin Herbert, despite a monstrosity of a performance in the playoffs this year, is still kind of getting there as well. Like, it's cool for them, but like DeAndre Hopkins, this is no different to me than them picking up Des Bryant or them picking up Odell Beckham.
Ooh.
It's not really, and that's no disrespect to D Hop. Obviously, D Hop is better right now in his career than either of them were at their points in their career when they joined Baltimore. But at the end of the day, again, it's like the Ravens have never been bereft of talent. The Ravens have had an issue at quarterback with being able to not turn the ball over in big time games in the playoffs. So if I'm going to grade it, I'll give it a C because I don't really care. Like this doesn't sway my opinion on whether or not the Ravens are a legitimate championship contender, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL as a whole. So I'll give it a C for the sake of giving it some type of grade.
Yeah, no, and I respect the take as well. It's not like they're not better because of it. They're not worse because of it. You know, you're still going to have Zay Flowers. You're still going to have Derrick Henry. You're still going to have Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews really being the main parts, of course, with Lamar Jackson of that offense. I'm going to go a B. I still think that DeAndre Hopkins will contribute. I think his 1,000-yard days are over. I think for some reason this year, if he did crack 1,000 yards, it might be 1,050 yards, maybe 1,005 yards, just something of that nature. You know, he's still a guy that's going to be respected. He's still a guy that can give great veteran presence to, you know, Zay Flowers. Obviously, you know, Rashad Bateman still being there. Mark Andrews is a veteran, but maybe even trying to talk with Isaiah Likely as well, you know, who's started to emerge at that tight end and really pass catcher position for Baltimore. So I'll give this one a B. Joey Bosa to the Bills.
I do like this one, especially when you consider the fact that they did let Von Miller go. Obviously, they don't play the same position, but Joey Bosa is still, when healthy, one of the better, you know, defensive players in the league, especially when we're talking about a pass rusher. I'll give it a B minus. I think for this Bills team, like again, kind of similar to the Ravens, this isn't really a move. I think that right now you can assess the success of it based on what happens in the regular season, because you know that given the division that they're in, those are going to be a shoe-in for 11, 12 games to win every single season as long as Josh Allen's healthy anyway. What we're going to, you know, gauge the success of this trade on is based on how impactful Joey Bosa is come postseason time, how much of a disruptor he can be come postseason time. We're matching up with the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bengals, whoever. And so for now, I'll give it a B. And again, I'll just put an asterisk on it. That could certainly change once we get to postseason time and we are able to get a full understanding of how impactful or not Joey Bosa is as a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, great points there. I'm going to give it a C, bro. I think a C is really the highest I can go. Joey Bosa has been one of the most unhealthy defensive players in the league in his tenure of being in the NFL. I mean, you know, I don't have the numbers pulled up. I don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me, but I can't remember the last time he played a full season. And I know that's easy for me to say as a podcaster, someone who doesn't have to go out and go through training camp, OTAs, try to play 17 regular season games, not even including if you get into preseason, including get into the playoffs. So we know that the NFL is very taxing on the body. But Joey Bosa is never healthy. And yes, there is a Greg Russo. Yes, there is an AJ Epinesa. There's a Matt Milano, if I still remember correctly, for the Buffalo Bills. So they have a lot of defensive talent there. I do believe Joey Bosa, again, is that veteran presence, someone that's going to be respected on the line. He might draw an occasional, you know, not even an occasional, but a double team quite a few times in a game. He was 19th in hits, 19th in run defense grade out of 211 eligible edge rushers, and then also 8th in forced fumbles as well. So he still does produce when he's there, but the question is, when is he consistently there and healthy? Best ability is availability in the sport. We obviously know that, so I'll stick that one with a C. The Falcons sign Leonard Floyd. They finally go out and get somebody who can rush the passer.
I do like this for the Falcons. I think offensively, they certainly seem to have figured it out. I was a little bit puzzled by the decision to keep Kirk Cousins on the roster, but I do kind of get it. Yeah. I think offensively, they're fine. I think the big thing for them now is kind of focusing on the defense and bringing in a guy in Leonard Floyd, who has been a key piece to some of the better defenses we've seen over the past couple seasons. Obviously, he spent a little bit of time in LA. He spent a little bit of time in Buffalo. They also I don't know if they let Grady Jarrett walk or if they traded Grady Jarrett to the Bears, but Grady Jarrett's no longer there, so they did need to have a replacement there. And you've got another veteran guy, a key voice in the locker room who can go out there and get after the passer. I'll give it a B minus. I think it's a good move for them. I mean, it's no different than when they went out there and they were able to bring in Jesse Bates from Cincinnati just last season. That's right. So it seems like they're good with what they have offensively. There's a lot of youth on offense. It looks like they're trying to get some veteran presence on defense so they can really infuse the defense with youth. So I like it. I'll give it a B minus.
Yeah, great point there as well. I'm going to go an A. Falcons, with them signing Leonard Floyd, Floyd did play all 17 games last year. He did grade 157th or worse out of 211 edge rushers for all PFF grades. But when you look at the production that he put on the field with his numbers, he did have 8.5 sacks, which is what the Falcons need. And he finished second behind Nick Bosa on the 49ers for being the sack leader as well. He hasn't had less than 8.5 sacks in a season since 2020. And Atlanta really needed this because they finished second to last in the NFL in total sacks with 31 and quarterback pressure percentage at just 28.1% last season. And Atlanta has struggled consistently year in and year out to have a premier edge rusher or just a person on the defensive side of the ball who consistently can get after the quarterback. I mean, yes, last year and, years before, you're looking at Bud Dupree, Grady Jarrett, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata, you got Caden Ellis as well. But then, outside of Grady Jarrett really punching in, yes, you had a Lorenzo Carter at one point as well. But you're just starting to look back over this team, and it's like you feel like the last time they really had a premier rusher of the quarterback that wasn't named Grady Jarrett or Deion Jones was, maybe Dante Fowler. You had a Tack McKinley at one point, a Vic Beasley, and it's just hard to see a team like Atlanta who is so loaded on the offensive side of the ball, and now they finally get that defensive player who can get after the quarterback. The head coach, Raheem Morris, was Floyd's defensive coordinator for 2 seasons with the Rams, and they won a championship together in 2021 in the magical Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp season. So I'll give this one an A. Speaking of Cooper Kupp, right before we got on the show about 45 minutes ago, the Seahawks did pick up Cooper Kupp. They are signing him. So if you want to give 2 individual grades, one for the Rams releasing Cooper Kupp, even though we knew it was coming, they allowed him to seek a trade, and then the Seahawks picking up Cooper Kupp just days after they get Sam Darnold.
I think, again, the Rams are in a position where they're a football team that we expect to be somewhat good in the regular season, right? We expect them to be competitive and be a playoff team. I think the presence of Davante Adams at this point in his career slightly edges out the presence of Cooper Kupp at this point in his. Cooper Kupp has been dealing with injury a little bit over the past couple seasons. I'll give the release that turned into a Davante Adams signing for LA. I'll give it an A-. Because I think if you're gonna let Cooper Kupp walk out the door, you have to go out there and find someone who is just as good, if not better. They did that with Davante Adams.
Right.
As for the Seahawks, I think the Seahawks have aced the offseason, right?
Yeah.
You trade Geno Smith away because he is old, he's mediocre, and he wanted a lot of money, and you're not gonna, you don't want to pay that guy anymore, and I completely understand that, right?
Right.
You released Tyler Lockett, which I think was a very, very surprising to a lot of people for a lot of reasons, right? Tyler Lockett, undeniably one of the greatest receivers the franchise has ever had. So that was a bit surprising. You also trade away DK Metcalf, but now you're bringing in a guy in Cooper Kupp who is a hometown guy who we know when he is healthy is one of the better receivers in this league. You still have, obviously, you still have Jackson Smith and Jigba on that roster. But now I believe you also have an additional 2nd and 3rd round pick if you are the Seattle Seahawks. And now you can take those extra picks and you can use them, or you can trade up and try to attack in a draft class that is littered with talent at the wide receiver position. So the Seahawks ended last season with one of the best wide receiver trios in the league. I would say probably top 5, definitely top 7 with Lockett, Metcalf, and Smith and Jigba. I think if they can draft a really talented wide receiver in this year's draft, they can still have a top 5, top 7 wide receiver trio with Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and whoever that rookie receiver is. And so I would give it an A. I think they've aced it. This isn't a rebuild for them. They just moved a couple players around. Retooling, got a little bit younger at the quarterback position, got a little bit older at wide receiver. But all in all, the goal is to still be competitive and make a push for the playoffs. I think the Seahawks will still be in the thick of things for that. So I'd say they aced it. I'd give it an A+.
Very well said. I'm going to give it a B for both sides. With the Rams releasing Cooper Kupp, and before that happened, they were able to bring in a Davante Adams, which I kind of was indifferent on that, because if you're wanting to move off Cooper Kupp because he's older and he's starting to become injury prone, and then you take a look at Davante Adams, who is getting older and who has had some injury history as well. Davante feels better than Kupp at this point in time, especially having Matthew Stafford versus Sam Darnold throwing to him. I was a little indifferent about it at first, and I originally wanted to give this a lower grade than a B, but I'll bring it up to a B for the Rams. because it allowed Devontae Adams to come in, which again I do feel like is a better receiver. And then when you look at the Seahawks picking up Cooper Kupp, he's going to be able to provide that veteran leadership for Jackson Smith and Jigba, a guy who we're really waiting to see the next versions of him. We know he was an amazing wide receiver at Ohio State, and he's continued to be a very solid receiver in the NFL. And another great point that you made is if they can go out and snag a great receiver in this class, they have a good as chance as any to return an elite, or not an elite, but return a good receiving core for Sam Darnold, which is exactly what Darnold needs coming off a year from throwing to Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, an underrated wide receiver duo. I believe I see a lot of people throwing the Chase and the Higgins and the Smitty and the AJ out there over them, which I totally get. But after that, to me, it's Jettas and it's Addison. I mean, Addison was the best receiver to come out of the draft in his draft class, and I thought it was insane that Minnesota was actually able to pick him up. So kind of mimicking the same receiving core here. The Vikings signed Javon Hargrave. What letter grade do you have for this, Marcus?
It's interesting. The Vikings have gone on a stretch of the past couple of years of bringing in older defensive players. And in years
coming off injury too.
Yeah, coming off of injury. And in years past, it hasn't always worked out for them. But Brian Flores seems to have figured it out for them, which I think, despite being a Packers fan, I think that's great for them to have figured it out defensively. Obviously, the big question for Minnesota, of course, is what's happening at quarterback, right? You assume with them letting Sam Darnold walk out the front door that J.J. McCarthy is the answer there. So you are going to be probably putting a little bit more pressure on this defense this year compared to last year, because this will be, in all intents and purposes, J.J. McCarthy's rookie season. But the signing alone, I would say, is a B. I mean, it's right on par again with what the Vikings have been doing with the past couple seasons of bringing in an older, more experienced guy on defense to fill a hole that you might need. With a little bit of injury history, but Brian Flores proved once again last season that he is one of the better defensive minds in the league.
That's right.
And for what it's worth, age is just a number, and apparently so is injury history, because he might be able to bring the best out of Javon Hargrave in this Minnesota Vikings system. So I'll give it a B. I don't know if the Vikings will be able to, replicate it down to a science. Exactly, the success that they had last season defensively. But I do think that bringing in a guy in Javon Hargrave who, has experience, who has a lot of skin in the game, who has been to a Super Bowl or two in his career, I believe, that certainly helps for a team that is trying to, mimic a lot of the success they saw this season, potentially get back to, playoff success and maybe conference championships, and hopefully one day back to a Super Bowl. So I'd say it's a B.
I'm going to say it's a B as well. He did play, the career low 3 games in 2024 after suffering a partially torn triceps that did require him to get surgery. But he's been a threat. He's been an absolute beast at the defensive tackle position, especially since 2021, not having less than 7 sacks since that season. Before, of course, he came in injured in this last year. And it's tough to see the Vikings bring in an aging player that is coming off of injury, but we know when he is available, which is much more times than not with Javon Hargrave, he's going to provide those pressures, he's going to provide those hurries, those quarterback hits, and he is going to get to the quarterback and get them to the turf, which is what these teams are really looking for when they go out in free agency and sign anybody that's on the defensive line. Sticking with the Vikings here, they turn right around and also pick up Jonathan Allen from the Washington Commanders.
I'm going to say the same grade for all the same reasons. I think, again, even more so for Jonathan Allen, I'm actually might even willing to bump it up to an A- or a B+, because when you look at the quarterbacks in this division, you're looking at Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and Caleb Williams. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the most mobile of the three. But Jordan Love and Jared Goff have both proven not only to be able to be successful in the pocket, but be successful outside of the pocket and with their legs when necessary. You win football games defensively by rushing the passer. That's the game. That is what defensive football is.
Why want the Saints to pick a defensive edge at number 9.
That's the name of the game, is being able to rush the passer. And Jonathan Allen does a great job of that. So I would say it's a B+. You might be able to convince me it's an A-. Again, it's a solid pickup, right on par with what the Vikings have been doing, picking up guys defensively who have a little bit of skin in the game, who can fit into a scheme that Brian Flores implemented almost as perfectly as you possibly could last season with the talent and the personnel that they had on the roster.
Yeah. I'm going to go B as well. Jonathan Allen, kind of similar to Hargrave. He had, only played 8 games in the season. He ended up having a partially torn pec. He was ruled out for the remainder of the year after that 8th game. He was actually able to make a comeback and start in week 18 for the Commanders, which was nice, which was just in time for them to make their improbable run to the NFC title game, of course, against the Eagles as well. So 2 solid pickups. I'll give it a B for both Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. Maybe my favorite signing of kind of wave 2 of NFL free agency. Feels like all the, legal tampering really bought up all of our time outside of this Cooper Kupp signing. The Steelers bring in Darius Slay, who is fresh off of a great season, a nice Super Bowl win with the Philadelphia Eagles. How do you feel about this one?
I like it. I think you have now 3 guys in that secondary. Now that you brought in Slay, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously, and you have Joey Porter Jr. You've got 3 guys in the secondary now who are bona fide ballers, and they're absolutely great at what they do. Defensively, for the Steelers, obviously, there's been a lot of questions about like who the quarterback is and how the offense is going to look. I think they'll have some of that figured out now with bringing in DK Metcalf. You hope that Aaron Rodgers is going to be healthy and good and not healthy and bad like he was in New York last year.
Healthy and good.
Yeah, like those are 2 different things. You can be healthy, but you can also suck. And I'm sure the Pittsburgh Steelers want Aaron Rodgers to be healthy and good at the quarterback position. Defensively, though, the big thing has always been the TJ Watt show. And what we've seen with the Pittsburgh Steelers is when TJ Watt is out, this defense kind of falls apart. Now, that's what happens when your best player goes away, no matter what side of the ball he plays on. But I do think that bringing in, again, a guy like Darius Slay, who has championship experience, who's been to 2 Super Bowls now in the last couple of years as well, who now has a Super Bowl ring to his name. We don't call him Big Play Slay for no reason. He has a lot of skin in the game. He's a veteran. And again, I like that trio of Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., and Darius Slay. Defensively, there's a lot of talent on this roster defensively. There always has been. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, so forth. There's always been talent. The issue has been, can the defense hold its own without TJ Watt present? So just like some of the other ones earlier, what I'll say is on paper, I'll give it a B, but we really won't be able to judge and grade it until we see what this defense looked like with Darius Slay without TJ Watt, assuming TJ Watt should miss a game or 2 here or there. But if everybody's healthy, I don't see why the Steelers can't have one of the better defenses in the league.
100%, no doubt, especially with everybody being healthy. The Steelers have a 1-10 record without TJ Watt all time since drafting him. So they literally fall apart, not only defensively, but as a team. And if their defense can't keep them in it for the last 5 to 8 years, that's really what their mantra has been. It's going to be, really bad. And when you bring in a guy like Darius Slay, I give this an A rating all day. The veteran leadership, insane veteran leadership at that. He's a great tackler. He was 4th in the league in pass breakups. I mean, he literally is called Big Play Slay for a reason. I'm going to be very excited to see him mentor up Joey Porter, who also his dad has played in the NFL as well. Minkah Fitzpatrick being one of the better safeties. And it's just going to be, I think, a secondary unit that is going to gain its respect early on in the league. And it's going to have a lot of talks as maybe being the best secondary out there and going to be in competition with the Eagles for all the great secondary players that they have as well. The Broncos go out and sign Talanoa Hufanga and also Dre Greenlaw, 2 players from the Niners also coming off of injury as well. What's your letter grade for this one?
I like this for the Broncos. You're talking about a Broncos defense that obviously has probably the best corner in football in Pat Surtain, right? So you have that going. This defense was one of the better defenses in the league down the stretch of the season as the Broncos are making their push. Now you're bringing in someone in Hufanga who, yes, is coming off injury, but again, another secondary mate for Pat Surtain in this revamped version of the no-fly zone that they're trying to work on that's been going great for them. And now you're also bringing in Dre Greenlaw as well, who we know was the green dot linebacker in San Francisco when he was on the field and healthy. I like this. Offensively, I think there's still some things that they can work on. I think they'll probably like to address some of those things in the draft. But defensively, when you can go out again, the theme of the defensive moves a lot this offseason has been guys who have veteran experience, who have been in some of the last couple of Super Bowls over the last 3 or 4 years we've seen, right? Leonard Floyd, Darius Slay, Hufanga, and Greenlaw, Hargrave, so forth and so on. Like these are all been guys who have made deep playoff runs going to other situations to be impactful, right? The Denver Broncos shocked a lot of people, and I think defensively, if Hufanga and Greenlaw are healthy and this offense is clicking the way that it was clicking at the end of the year last year, they can make a lot of noise again this year. So I really do like this move, and I'll give it an A.
I like this move as well. I think these two guys are really going to be pivotal and creating a great defense that the Broncos really already possess between a Nick Bonito, a Zach Allen, PS2, Riley Cooper. These guys just keep growing together. You bring in a guy like Hufanga, who is great when he's healthy, but he's played a total of 17 games between the last two seasons. You look at Dre Greenlaw, had the horrible Super Bowl injury, just trying to come off the sideline. He also has only played 17 games within the last two seasons, but we know the type of trademark defensive player that these guys can be. We saw it in San Francisco, so I think this is a solid B. It would be an A if these guys were not coming off of injury and they not only bring in one, but two. Same thing for Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. If those guys were not coming off of injury, because we've seen, sometimes you just won't be the same if you have to, go in for surgery or cut your season short because the injury is so severe. The Colts signed Charvarius Ward, one of the highly coveted cornerbacks, that was on the market. And out of all teams, the Colts were able to pick him up.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't care for the Indianapolis Colts right now. They have massive fish to fry. They need to figure out who their quarterback is going to be. Bringing in Daniel Jones,
which is crazy to say,
to be the competition for Anthony Richardson was a really interesting decision there. Charvarius Ward is a solid cornerback in this league. Certainly very talented. I think he probably would have been better off going to a team like Dallas, maybe a team like Pittsburgh, who is a little bit more better suited to be competitive and maybe make the playoffs. But with that being said, the Colts are bringing a talented player. Whether or not it moves the needle, I don't know. I'll just default and give it a C.
I'm going to go with a B on this one. Again, because he is coming off of an injury-riddled season. But we've seen Charvarius Ward go out there with some of the best wide receiver ones in the league, and as that number one corner with the Niners, really be able to make a difference. He had hamstring, knee, personal issues last season that caused him to miss 5 games. And his grades overall from the last season, because of everything that was going on with the injuries and even some of the off-field stuff, it really affected him. His overall grade from PFF, his coverage grade, pass rush grade, and run defense grade were all 122nd or worse out of 223 corners. So he was rolling around the 50th percentile, if not lower, which is just going to come in as average for you in the National Football League. He was 31st in passer rating allowed last season, but I think a fresh, scenery, a fresh environment for him with the Colts can, possibly do him some good. So I'll give this a B, maybe leaning towards a B minus because the grades from PFF were very solid. And then the final one here, the Patriots signed Carlton Davis. They are just on a free agency frenzy, it feels like, bringing in some solid defensive players. We know that they pick up, Milton Williams, which is really great. So what do you think of the Pats signing Carlton Davis, Marcus?
The Patriots have a lot of money to spend, and they're doing a good job spending it wisely.
Finally. They had a ton of cash to spend last season too.
Yeah, it's good that they're actually spending it wisely now. I'm a little bit surprised that they're choosing to spend defensively instead of choosing to spend offensively.
Right.
But then again, when you think about the Patriots, and especially under Bill Belichick, they are known for their defense. So I guess it makes sense. The Patriots a couple of years ago, when Mac Jones was there and made it to the Pro Bowl, they did have one of the better defenses in the league down the stretch of that season as well. So maybe they're trying to get back to that. I'll give it a B. I like the move. The Patriots are a team where you kind of have holes everywhere. So as long as you can put a good player in one of those holes, you can't really go wrong unless, of course, it just completely doesn't pan out when the season starts. So I'll give it a B. And I'll say that when like I said, you got a lot of money. Scary money don't make money. So they got to figure out a way to spend this money and get this team to be a little bit more competitive, especially now they seem to have their quarterback of the future with Drake May.
Yep. You got Mike Vrabel opening up the doors of the Brinks truck and just going to buy any defensive player he possibly can. I'm going to give this one an A. You got that chippy, aggressive corner in Carlton Davis, who has been very solid in the league in his career. 74 overall grade, 60 pass rush grade, 78 run defense grade, and then a 72 on the coverage grade, all top 15% for corners in the NFL for his performance. So I think it's very solid. This feels like a very Mike Vrabel defensive free agency signing. So I'll give this one an A. You guys get in the chat, get in the comments, let us know what you thought of grading NFL free agency part 2. We did it on Tuesday with JV. Now we're doing it today with Marcus on the show. Man, let's go ahead and dive into some NFL draft talk. I feel like I'm a little behind on talking about the draft, but I don't like to just say any or everything about it because it's a very intricate process. And after looking at these top 5 NFL draft quarterbacks that we're about to discuss, I've got a little bit of a shakeup on the list for everybody. So if you want to start with your 5, I'll go with my 5. And like we said, we'll just bounce back and forth, 4, 4, 3, 3. So let me know, who is your number 5 NFL draft quarterback for the 2025 draft, Marcus?
Jackson Dart has won me over a bit over the past couple weeks, just kind of taking a look at what he brings to the table. I think the great thing about all 5 of the guys on my list is that they each do something great. In fact, I think they each do something better than anyone else in the draft class. For Jackson Dart, he puts a lot of velocity and a lot of zip on his ball. He can put that ball in windows that not many quarterbacks in this draft class can, and not many quarterbacks that are already in the NFL can. I really like Jackson Dart. He's obviously an SEC quarterback coming from Ole Miss, so you know that he has big game experience because just about every game in the SEC is a big game, right? He knows what it takes to play against NFL caliber defenses because we've seen the SEC over the last 5, 7, 10, 12, 15 years put in the most defensive talent in the league than any other conference probably combined, right? And so when you take a look at Jackson Dart, obviously you have a mobile guy, an athletic guy. You have a guy who has the presence and the toughness in the pocket to move and evade defenders. But again, the zip on the ball is going to be the big thing because at the NFL, as you and I both know, the game just moves at a quicker pace. And so he's got to be able to get that ball in there. He does a great job of doing that. I would say the only downside for Jackson Dart, and the reason why he's not any higher on my list, is because he does still need to improve with his decision making. He kind of falls into the hero ball just a little bit sometimes in those big moments. But aside from that, I love him. I think he's a leader. He's competitive. And he is a player that any one of those, I would say, late first, early second round teams who might still need a quarterback to maybe back up their aging, their aging vet, looking at a team, maybe like Vegas, looking at a team, maybe even like Pittsburgh, if they're truly going all in on Aaron Rodgers, right? A team like that who just might still need, like, that would be a place for him to go and kind of learn a bit before he can actually start to clean up some of those things. But I think that Jackson Dart is the 5th best quarterback in this year's draft class for sure.
As do I. It's close because I kind of lump Jackson Dart in with a Jalen Milroe, with a Riley Leonard, like mostly mobile quarterback. If you ask them to beat you with their arm over longer stretches of the game, you're going to start seeing their weaknesses. So I'm going to have Jackson Dart at number 5 as well. 4,300 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 4th in QBR, 69% completion. So a very accurate quarterback. He's actually just the 4th quarterback in SEC history to surpass 12,000 yards of total offense, which is saying a lot because we've had a lot of really solid quarterbacks come through the SEC. He's improved every year in college. You can take a look at his tape, take a look at his numbers, and it shows you that he consistently puts the ball, in really tight, kind of almost perfect spots for his receivers to maximize their yards after catch, forcing defenses to really account for his legs on every snap with pretty good improv skills as well. And I think he really thrives in the up-tempo, get up and go situations. Let's maybe call some no huddle, like really get this high passing style type of offense going. He's a pretty solid RPO quarterback, and I think that's the best way to sum him up, is he is a solid RPO quarterback. I'm not going to rely on him to beat me with his arm. I don't think he's a special quarterback by any means. And you say a late first round, maybe early second round pick. I've got this guy as a day 2 pick more than likely. Maybe anytime in the second round, probably a third round pick for me, but we'll see how it plays out there. His processing for defensive looks, quickly can start to come around at certain points. And then, he's able to deliver decisive throws in rhythm as well. Sometimes he does bail on clean pockets a little too early, being that it kind of feels like he's a natural runner of the football. I don't think he's a very complete pocket passer right now. He can get a little erratic when he throws the deep ball. And then when you force him into obvious passing downs against those higher caliber defenses, his production can dip away for sure. And again, when you force him to be a drop back, beat me with your arm passer for lengthy stretches of the game, his production is going to wear as well. But the style of offense that he was in with Ole Miss, that really tempo-based one-read system, kind of masked some of the limitations for Jackson Dart. But NFL defenses are going to force him to process info a lot more quickly, make those full field reads, have those 5, 6, 7-step drops, be able to deal with an edge rusher coming right into your face. And, he might need to sit and develop behind someone, I think, to become a pure passer is really what I'm seeing here. If I had to give a comp for him, I feel like I'm leaning between like a Bryce Young, maybe Ryan Tannehill style quarterback. I believe Tannehill was a better passer of the football, and even Bryce Young coming out as well. But when you look at the stature, look at the play style, it just really what it screams to me there. Who you have at number 4 for these top 5 NFL draft QBs?
Real quick for 4, I'm glad you talked about your player comp, because I was going to say, I think if we're going a ceiling floor situation for Jackson Dart, I think his floor is New York Jets Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was very panicky with the football, kind of panicked a bit, especially down the stretch of tight games. We've seen Jackson Dart do that a little bit more. I think his floor is New York Jets Sam Darnold. I think his ceiling is what we've been seeing from Baker Mayfield these past couple seasons in Tampa Bay. Like, I think that's how good Jackson Dart can be, right? Like when I think about Jackson Dart and I think about Baker Mayfield, obviously you talk about what they can do as quarterback, but also personality wise, they're very fiery. They're passionate. They're leaders. And when they get going and the offense is really rolling and you get into the no huddle style, that's when they're usually at their best. So if Jackson Dart can be drafted into a situation where you do have that heavy RPO offense, like you said, because he is an RPO guy, very solid in RPO, but also has that little bit of no huddle in there as well, I think he can excel in a Baker Mayfield type role in that situation. So I 100% agree with you there. At number 4, and this one between this one and who I have at number 3 was really, really tough for me. I went back and forth, but I think I have Jalen Milroe as the 4th best quarterback in this year's draft class. Again, I think that there is one thing that all 5 of these guys that I have in my top 5 do that's better than anyone else. And I think there is no one better at making something out of nothing than Jalen Milroe. We've seen that a lot. I think back to the game in 2023, I believe it was against Texas A&M when Alabama won 26-20 and was a come from behind victory. That was really what when we saw Jalen Milroe kind of have like his big when he really burst onto the scene and show like this is a guy who you can draft and he can be a franchise guy. Like he has a lot of those intangibles that you like to see. And I like Jalen Milroe. I think obviously there's a lot of questions about things he can improve on. His pocket awareness isn't that great. His decision making is not that great. He's very great throwing the football down the field, not so much in the short to intermediate range. He's obviously going to want to work on that, or else defenses are going to feast on him. And he's not that great with going through his reads. Kind of like what you said about Jackson Dart with being a natural runner of the football. I do think that Jalen Milroe kind of bails on his progressions a bit too quickly just to go and get a couple extra yards on the ground, which is fine in moments, right? But you still want to be able to throw the football. You still want to be able to prove that you are a dual threat and can both pass and run the ball. And if we're talking player comparisons, if I think about, a player comparison for Jalen Milroe, I think about Chicago Bears Justin Fields would be his floor. And I think if he drafted in the right situation with the right pieces around him, I honestly believe that Jalen Milroe's ceiling is what we're seeing from Jalen Hurts right now in Philly. Like if Jalen Milroe gets into a position where he can sit for a couple years behind the right guy and learn a little bit, maybe go wherever Russell Wilson ends up, kind of, I think is another loose comparison for here. And they really build that team in a way that would best benefit him with receivers and an offensive line and a running back, and the defense is really solid. And he can just go out and you cut the field in half and you do a little RPO and you have a little bit of, QB design runs and things of that nature. You can still get his stuff off that way. I think you look at a Jalen Milroe and at his best in that type of situation, he could be what we see in Philly with Jalen Hurts. But his floor is definitely Chicago Bears Justin Fields. Like if he goes into the worst situation possible, the best he'll ever be in his career, and the worst situation possible is what we saw from Justin Fields in Chicago.
Yeah. Very, very, very good points there. I'll go ahead and spoil it a little bit. Jalen Milroe's not going to be in my top 5. I just don't think he is it's kind of why I had, Dart, Milroe, Leonard all in the same category. None of them are really pure passers of the football. They're big time competitors. They'll really carve you up with their legs. But when it comes to going through your reads, making good decisions, I don't see that on the tape. The numbers might show it, but I don't see it on the tape when it really matters. Number 4, I'm going to have Kyle McCord, a quarterback out of Syracuse. Obviously, he started at Ohio State for a couple years as well. 4,800 yards passing, 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 66% completion. He was 14th in QBR. He actually set ACC records for almost 4,800 yards passing, 47.79 exactly, broke Deshaun Watson's record, and he actually set the ACC record for touchdown passes as well with 34. And this guy does have quick release. He does have solid mechanics. I feel like he has some kind of advanced pre-snap recognition, which allows him to diagnose coverages, which is very, very vital in the NFL. Surgical accuracy in that 15 to 25 yard range. And you even look at deep out routes or seam throws, and he shows you those NFL caliber throws and the NFL caliber ball placement, consistently hitting receivers in stride on vertical routes beyond 40 yards, which is very solid. And the anticipation on his timing for his routes that he, is throwing for his receivers is very good as well. You even look at comebacks, deep curls where he's actually releasing the ball before the break, and his decision making in the red zone is very top notch. Now, he's not very athletic. Sometimes he's going to stare down his targets and force throws instead of taking what the defense gives him. He's not the best under pressure. He led the Power 5 in both big-time throws, but also turnover-worthy plays in 2024 as well. And if you got a team that's running kind of like the West Coast offense with some vertical elements and pretty heavy play action schemes as well, it'll help you really mask his physical limitations. For a comp for Kyle McCord, I'm going to go Mac Jones or Brock Purdy, probably a better version of one of the two of those, probably leaning more towards a Brock because we've seen what he's been able to do with just the short longevity rather of his NFL career versus now Mac Jones is backing up Brock Purdy, ironically. And, the Niners, when they traded up for Trey Lance, a lot of people thought that Mac Jones was going to be that pick. So I've got Kyle McCord at number 4. Give me your number 3.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but for all the reasons you just mentioned, Kyle McCord is my 3. I actually think Kyle McCord can be the steal of this year's draft at quarterback. For those reasons, I think everything you said was perfectly spot on. Again, if we're talking about the thing that he does better than anyone else, it is that decision making. Right when you start your career at Ohio State, the thing that we love about the thing we love about the SEC, right, is that generally if you want a good defensive player, you go to the SEC. That's where they're at. And if you want to know how good a quarterback can play against NFL caliber defenses, you watch their games against the SEC, right? The great thing about Kyle McCord and the reason why he was so successful at Syracuse is because he started at Ohio State, he already had experience playing in an NFL-like offense, right? That West Coast offense, that spread offense, right? The deep ball of his, he throws a very beautiful ball. I don't. there's only one guy I think who throws a better ball, a deep ball, than he does in this year's draft class, quarterback wise. And I love Kyle McCord, and I think he can be the steal of this year's draft. If I had to go player comp, I would agree with you on the Mac Jones, Brock Purdy point. I'd probably lean more closer to Brock Purdy. Again, for all the same reasons. I do think though that if he can improve on a couple of things, I think if he can kind of approve the consistency with the deep ball. He throws a great deep ball, but it's not always consistently where it needs to be. Sometimes he can put it in spots that not many people can, as far as like those out routes, those curve routes, those comeback routes, all those things you mentioned, but it's not always consistently there. If he can prove the consistency with the deep ball, and then if he can just get a little bit mobile, right? Because it seems like in today's NFL, having a little bit of mobility is kind of like a necessity now because of these, these pass rushers, these edge rushers are quicker than they've ever been before, and you got to be able to buy yourself some time when the play breaks down. If you can work on those two things, I think his ceiling is what we've seen from Jared Goff in Detroit these past couple seasons. I think he can be that good if he improves on those two things. But for sure, I think in the right situation, he's a Brock Purdy type player and definitely could be the steal of the draft. And we could be talking about him the way that we have talked about Brock Purdy over the past couple of seasons, about potentially being one of the better quarterbacks in this league. Of course, assuming that when things start to fall apart around him, he can still go out there and win you the football game. I love Kyle McCord. He's my number 3.
Yeah, Kyle McCord is going to be a really special one in this draft, and I don't see him high on a lot of people's boards. And, there's really only 2 first-round quarterbacks in this draft, and you could argue that one of them even is not really first-round worthy, but there's the insane talent and the athleticism that he shows is possibly going to prove that. For number 3, I think this is the most slept-on quarterback in the draft right now. I'm not understanding why. I do understand why after looking at some of his measurables and some of the notes that people have made about him at the combine, but his tape does not lie. And that is Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon. 3,800 yards last year, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 73% completion, which was second nationally, the 3rd QBR. But you look at his height. He's 6 foot, technically 5'11" for measurables. You look at his weight, he's about 200 pounds. Arm length is not very solid. His wingspan is in the bottom 7th percentile. His height, weight, arm length, and wingspan is in the bottom 7th percentile of measurements for quarterbacks in this year's draft class. Now, he has started an FBS record 63 games, so he has a ton of talent. I think this guy played 6 years of college football. Quick feet. He can be mobile. He actually had a 54-yard touchdown run against Oregon State this season, and he was zooming right up the sidelines. Very compact, efficient throwing as well. I think his pre-snap awareness is pretty exceptional, and his post-snap processing is good too, and it shows you that on the tape. The pocket mobility is pretty excellent. He's got good spatial awareness. He will climb the pocket under pressure, which a lot of these quarterbacks will not like to do, and specifically Shedeur Sanders, who is a top quarterback in this draft. He does not like to climb the pocket in pressure. He'll take some bad sacks behind a very rough offensive line over in Colorado, and he's shown a mastery of 3 different types of, of offenses between the spread, the air raid, and the pro style concepts that he's been in between the few stops he's had in college football. I think his ball placement is pretty elite as well on intermediate throws between about 10 and 20 yards. He's a solid decision maker. Now, he does have limited ability at times to throw outside the numbers due to the length of his arms, and he sometimes struggles to find the throwing lanes in the middle of the field and between the hashes. But that just sounds like general growth as a quarterback that is needed from a good coach that hopefully he'll be able to land with. And, everyone knocks him for his undersized figure, his short arms, his small hands, but there's a guy like Russell Wilson out there, and there's a guy like Jalen Hurts out there, and there's an NFL legend out there called Drew Brees, and a guy like Kyler Murray went number 1 overall. So the talent is there for Dillon Gabriel being a smaller quarterback, and I really don't think he plays like a small quarterback. I think his head is always up behind the line. He's not struggling to see his reads. Like, he is a very solid guy in this draft, and a lot of people say he's going to be a day 3 pick. Don't be shocked if he's an early day 2 or maybe even a late 1. More than likely not going to be a late 1 unless someone falls way back, feels like that he's going to be a quarterback that's on the board at the end of the 1, which would be kind of crazy to see. But if Dillon Gabriel was starting to get, whether people like it or not, round 1 hype, I'm not going to knock them for that, because I think he is a very talented quarterback. Now, he's going to need a system built around possibly some of those quick game concepts where his processing speed and release can really shine. And the testing confirms what the tape shows. He's not a creator really outside of structure. He's not a great off-script guy, but I don't think you have to be a great off-script quarterback in the NFL today. You just have to make it happen when it's needed, and really just at some doable times. It doesn't always have to be a Lamar or Jaden kind of, extension of the play, Mahomes or Josh Allen. Like, if you can just be, Joe Burrow every now and then with some of his mobility, like Jalen Hurts is a drop back passer first and foremost, but if he's got to get out of the pocket, he will. As kind of what I see a little bit in Dillon Gabriel. Now, I'm not saying that, Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts are really going to be comps here. But his pocket movement skills are more than adequate for working within, plenty of schemes in the NFL, but it's really going to be a timing based offense, play action, design rollouts to create those throwing lanes to really maximize his strengths, because again, he is 5'11", 6 foot technically, and protecting him from his physical limitations that everybody is roaring about. That's why he's like the number 9, number 10 quarterback to some people in this draft. Absolutely blasphemous to me. You're really telling me a quarterback when we've seen a Bo Nix. We called him, not we, people out there called him Bo Picks, and now he just looked great in his rookie year with Sean Payton. People didn't really have the respect for Justin Herbert until he got to the league and got thrown into the fire with his first game against Mahomes, and then had to turn around and play Breeze, and then I think had to turn around and play Brady, if I'm not mistaken. So, these Oregon quarterbacks are tried and true, and just because he's smaller, I'm not going to discount that from what he shows me on the tape. I would give him probably a Tua, maybe a Bryce Young comp as well, a couple of quarterbacks that came out of Alabama, and if he continues to, do well in the NFL, he could have that Joe Burrow type of presence to where the arm is great to make plenty of throws, but he can also get really more mobile than a Joe Burrow can as well. So we'll be able to see how it plays out. Who do you have at number 2?
I love the love for Dillon Gabriel there. He was 6th on my list, and it was really hard to leave him off. But at number 2, I have Cam Ward. Cam Ward has the best arm in this draft. He has the strongest arm. His arm is the most NFL ready. And I love Cam, and I think Cam is great. I know there was a lot of questions about his ability to lead and all that other stuff because he decided to sit out of the second half of the bowl game Miami had. That's I don't care about none of that. Miss me with all that.
Right.
I do have some concerns. He has a strong arm, but the deep ball is not as accurate as it could be, or as accurate as it should be. He can get it down there, but it's not always accurate. He'll need to work on that. He'll also need to work on his processing speed. He has a very quick release, but he doesn't get through his progressions quick enough. And in the NFL, he's going to have to speed that process up just a little bit. I think he sticks on 1 or 2 reads a little bit too long. It almost seems like when he comes up to the line of scrimmage, based on what the play is and maybe a couple of pre-snap adjustments, whoever he decides he's throwing the ball to, there's nothing that you can say unless it's just triple coverage or something that will get him off of that read. And so he'll need to work on that a little bit more, because that will be his undoing very quickly at the next level in the NFL, just being able to get through all those reads quickly and do so efficiently. The only other thing for me that gives me a little bit of concern is, yes, he is mobile and he can get out of the pocket, but his footwork in the pocket is not that great.
Yeah.
Like, if you give him if it's a design run, if it's an RPO, if it's a read option, something like that, he's fine. But just being able to move and evade, step up in the pocket, step back in the pocket, left, right, it's not all there. And that is something he's going to have to work on, because, again, like I said, these edge rushers and these pass rushers are faster than they've ever been, and he's going to have the quickness and the ability to do that. We've seen him be able to throw the off-platform throws outside of the pocket. He's going to have to figure out a way to try to bring that inside of the pocket as well, because of those things are going to be more prevalent at the next level. If I had to give him a comp, I would say at his very best, he could be Deshaun Watson before injury. Similar build, similar arm strength. Deshaun Watson also had the best arm in his class as well. Coming out when he was drafted by Houston. And again, similar question with Deshaun Watson as well coming out was, does he have the footwork necessary to maneuver inside the pocket? I think Cam Ward at his best can be pre-injury Deshaun Watson, specifically in Houston. If Cam Ward is just an average guy, he's Geno Smith. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that if he's the Geno Smith we saw in Seattle, not the first version of Geno Smith that we saw. But I think that that there's a lot of people who are going to say that Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this draft because he's bigger. He's more. When you think of an NFL quarterback, he has that build a little bit more compared to Shedeur. Not to spoil it, Shadeur's number one for me. But I think that there's a couple things that Cam needs to work on, and a couple things that Cam doesn't do quite as well. So I think he's number two. It'll be interesting to see who drafts him. I feel very strongly about who drafts the quarterback and who doesn't. He'll definitely need to be drafted in the right situation. But there are some situations where he could possibly be able to overcome how bad it is, depending on who the coach is and things of that nature. But I think Cam Ward's the second best quarterback in this year's draft class for sure.
I've got Cam Ward in the same spot as well. 4,300 yards, 39 touchdowns, 7 picks, 67% completion, led the number one offense in the nation in Miami, second in QBR. And, Cam reminds me a lot of Caleb Williams. He's a bit of an unorthodox quarterback. And I feel like these unorthodox quarterbacks are getting a lot more attention than they really deserve at times, because we see the Mahomes and the Josh Allens that can really just go really off script. And yes, you can throw Lamar and Jaden into there as well, but they feel a little more direct when the play breaks down versus like Mahomes and Josh are really backyard footballish. Like, what can we do? And I think that's why guys like Caleb and Cam Ward are really getting their types of love. And it's not that they don't deserve it, but we just saw what Caleb Williams looked like in year one. Now, yes, rough offensive line, rough coaching, but there was a lot of times where he was running back up into a muddy pocket or just trying to pirouette out of the way. And it's like, this is the NFL, brother. Ask Joe Burrow. He had to learn early in his rookie year after coming off the Heisman season, like, this is what the NFL is about, and it's going to change you as a quarterback. And I think Cam Ward is going to see a lot of those similar things. He thrives in the medium to long throws. He could be better on throws about 40 plus yards down the field. And that's a hard throw as it is. I don't care who you are tossing the football out there. And, sometimes he doesn't have that discipline to take the short throws, and what the defense gives him as a play develops. His ball security is a little concerning when extending plays. He had 8 fumbles in 2024. His mechanics and his footwork, to me, the foundation of a quarterback is your mechanics and your footwork. That is why he's number 2 on my list. He's consistently throwing with a sidearm motion. He holds the ball low. He often misaligns his hips and feet when he's throwing. And as a result, the ball placement can be erratic. It can be kind of crazy, but his arm is very quick. He's got a whip for an arm. He gets the ball out with great velocity as well. Sometimes he relies too much on his arm talent. And when you talk about the hips and the feet not aligning, he makes some of the throws that maybe nobody in the league can make right now besides some of the best quarterbacks, and certainly throws that only he was making in this college football season. But with that comes some of the erratic throws as well, which can turn into turnovers, which can turn into losses and stress on your defense and even your offense as well. Now, I do think he reads and progresses the field well and is still growing on more complex coverages, but I don't recall a college quarterback, maybe outside of a CJ Stroud or a Joe Burrow, that was really reading defenses at a high level coming straight out of college, complex blitz packages, watching the safeties roll over the top, being able to move the safeties with their eyes, because there's even NFL quarterbacks today that struggle with that. And I think Cam Ward can really grow in that area as well. Now, he's a confident as hell thrower in all situations and coverages, right? Like, even though his play style is a little chaotic in nature, he's actually graded highly in almost every stable category, according to PFF. Great improvisational athlete. He's not a Jaden. He's not a Lamar. He's not a Kyler type of runner. Cam Ward, ironically, ran a 4.87 at the combine, about the same as what I think Kyle McCord ran at, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, maybe it was Jackson Dart that ran about the same combine time. And, they both seem a little, quick in similarity and in some of those, same aspects. But very good pocket presence, very good pocket awareness, an insanely clutch quarterback as well in Cam Ward, as we saw multiple double-digit deficit comebacks, just and with those wins, despite having a bad defense against a, against a Cal, there was the Georgia Tech game. There was a Syracuse game. I mean, there were multiple games where he was just having to will this team back in and winning at the last moment, winning on final plays. And it was really crazy to see, at times. But he is the prototype of the modern NFL quarterback at the end of the day. And I think if we're talking about comps, they're just going to come out and say it. I think it could be a Josh Allen. I think it could be a Patrick Mahomes type of quarterback if he lands with the right coach to get the mechanics and to get the fundamentals right, because he passes the eye test to be in that upper caliber of quarterbacks in the league, but he's going to have to be groomed to get there. It's almost like he's a more polished version and more fundamentally sound version of Anthony Richardson, but is that really giving him that much, advantage? Because he still needs to tighten up some of his, fundamental aspects of the game. Now, we know Anthony Richardson was not a very solid passer of the football. He was a freak athlete. He could get good off script, but he was not nearly the level of, how polished Cam Ward is right now. But Cam Ward still has some steps to go in this league, and more than likely being the number 1 overall pick from what I've seen from a lot of boards, even though I've got Shedeur as 1, just like you said as well. It's going to be interesting to see who drafts them, and interesting to see who drafts any of these quarterbacks, especially with Shedeur being behind an awful offensive line, taking 52 sacks last year after getting the hell beat out of him the year before in his first year in Colorado. So I know you've got Shedeur at 1. Give me your reasons there, and then I'll really just piggyback off of it for you. It sounds like we had a pretty similar quarterback list here.
Yes, Shedeur Sanders is undeniably the best quarterback in this draft class. I don't like using the phrase "it's not even close" because that can seem to be a disrespectful phrase because it is a bit close, but it's not like the gap is
his fundamentals secure it for him.
The gap is wider than what people have been making it seem like over the past couple of months. Shedeur Sanders is bar none the best quarterback in this year's draft class for a number of reasons. First of all, he's the most accurate quarterback in this year's draft class. And I know that a lot of people like to bust his chops and talk about, he did a lot of check downs in the nature, but let's not forget, he was playing behind of all these guys that we've ranked, between the two of us and other guys that you might see. He had the worst offensive line of all these guys by far. He's not throwing those check downs because that was the play, because he had to. Like he needed to get the ball out of his hands or else he was going to take a sack. Now, his internal clock that we all love to talk about, it's not that great. That has to be better. He has as you mentioned earlier on, he takes a lot of unnecessary sacks when he does get a clean pocket. He's going to have to work on that component of it. But he's the most accurate quarterback in this year's draft class. He's the best leader in this year's draft class also.
Yes.
Leadership is not just judged on, it's not just based on what happens when you win. It's also based on what happens when you lose. What happens when you're down.
Correct.
You're faced with adverse situations. And there's no quarterback in this year's draft class who's been scrutinized more and placed in more adverse situations than Shedeur Sanders. Think about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the starting quarterback at Jackson State with Deion when he first gets to college, right? And that was a whole thing. And then Deion leaves and he brings him with him, and Deion makes it perfectly clear. This is your starting quarterback. He doesn't need to work for the job. This is who he is. And there's a lot of judgment about, well, can Shedeur Sanders be a Power 5 quarterback? Can he be effective as a Power 5 quarterback? And what we saw in Shedeur's debut game against the runner-up TCU Horned Frogs in 2023 is he put on what I would say, by my estimation, is the best game of his collegiate career up to that point, and probably is still the best game of his collegiate career. I believe he had 510 passing yards. He had 3 touchdowns. It was a comeback win. He put the ball exactly where it needed to be, made a lot of big-time throws and big-time moments. There's no better leader at the quarterback position in this year's draft class than Shedeur Sanders. Again, I think there's things he needs to work on, but if I had to compare him to someone in the NFL right now, I would say that he, at his best, could be a more mobile Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is an exceptional leader. He's great pre-snap. I have gone as far as say that Joe Burrow is the most surgical quarterback in the league right now. Shedeur Sanders, very surgical, and honestly, the best with pre-snap reads as well. Like there's not a lot of guys that are making those pre-snap adjustments at the level that we have seen him do that consistently. A lot through the fact that he has a very close relationship with the GOAT, Tom Brady. At his worst, if Shedeur Sanders right now is a quarterback, this is his final product with no improvements made at all, he's still Dak Prescott in this league, which I think is still fine because we're talking about a top 15, top 12, in my opinion, quarterback when healthy in this league. You might need to put a little bit more around him to kind of heighten your chances of winning. But Shedeur Sanders is bar none the best quarterback in this draft. He's the best leader. He's the most surgical. He's the most accurate. And anyone who doesn't think that is just choosing to hate on him because of the name on the back of his jersey. If you strip the name off the back of his jersey and you just watch the tape tells you without a shadow of a doubt, Shedeur Sanders
is the best quarterback
in this year's draft, 100%.
I agree with you. I've got Shedeur number one as well. A little over 4,100 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 picks. So damn near a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Led the FBS in completion percentage was 72%. He was 20th in QBR. He is a little small at 6'2", 215 pounds. You maybe like him to be about 230 to 235, and he'll probably put on weight when he gets to the NFL. You know, these guys are still kids, you know, but he is in the 30th percentile for weight, you know, which is, you know, kind of keeping him a little smaller in that aspect. But if I had to give a perfect description for Shedeur Sanders, he's an athletic, textbook, fundamentally sound quarterback who's a smooth but not twitchy athlete. He did run in the 80th percentile excuse me, for the 40-yard dash. And he can escape the pocket to create yardage with his legs. Like he's a Kurt Benkert on YouTube, former NFL quarterback, said it very well. He's a willing and able runner. And that's something that you need in today's league. You don't have to run, but if you are willing to and you are able to and the play breaks down, or if you just need a simple 4 or 5 yard scramble, slide down, keep the chains moving, like that is very valuable in today's National Football League. He's insanely accurate in the short and medium range throws. He's good on timing routes as well and even throwing people open. Now, his downfalls, he does sometimes hold the ball too long, and when a play is developing, he'll run backward, take sacks, drift backward under pressure instead of climbing in the pocket, like I said earlier. And he's got to improve on his recognition and response time against the sophisticated blitz packages and really the exotic looks that he'll get in the secondary as safeties and corners like to roll over. And again, that's a lot to ask of an NFL quarterback. I said, you know, off the top of my head, CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow out of recent memory are the only couple that I've seen that like day one, they are in there and they they were doing it in college, right? And then they understand it. And when you think of the programs they were in, Joe Burrow for LSU, CJ Stroud for Ohio State, you're going to see those types of looks because you're going to be in the big types of games that make you exercise those types of skills. You know, his mechanics and accuracy, even with chaos around him, are maintained, which is very good, very solid pre-snap adjustments. And he rarely puts the ball in harm's way for his college career, a 121 to 23 touchdown to interception ratio. But you know what I think a lot of people are judging him off of? It's the Alamo Bowl against BYU where they had the chance to go and win the Big Ten champ, or are they Big 12? I think
Big 12, yeah.
Is a Big 12. They had the chance to beat BYU and get into the Big 12 championship, and they screwed themselves out of it. Deion, Shedeur, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, a lot of those guys talked about it, right? But that doesn't mean that against stiffer competition, Shedeur Sanders has not performed, because he has. Now, I do think he'll need to be drafted by a team with a good O-line and mostly a timing style offense with some very efficient play, and that's what a lot of teams shoot for, right? You want to be very efficient in any style of offense that you're running in, you know, Pee Wee League all the way up to the National Football League. So if I had to give a few comps for Shedeur, I'm looking at CJ Stroud, I'm looking at Baker Mayfield, I'm looking at Jared Goff. Possibly not Goff, because Goff doesn't like to get out of the pocket. He's been, you know, ragged on before for being a statue, but I think CJ Stroud is a great comp for him. And again, the reason I give Shedeur the number one spot is because he's fundamentally sound. He's very accurate. Cam Ward tries to throw a little too much Caleb Williams, I almost said Josh Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes into his game to where it's like, so he misses a lot of layups. He'll miss a lot of, you know, short throws, and he'll always be looking for the big play down the field, talking about Cam Ward. And sometimes that just doesn't come to fruition. You know, he relies a lot on arm talent. Shedeur relies a lot on knowledge, reading defenses, and actually having those mechanics hold up for him. So great segment there, chopping up the top 5 NFL draft quarterbacks. And again, just outside, I had Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, and Riley Leonard as well. But I think this draft is really consisting of the big 5, and I don't see anybody with Kyle McCord or Dylan Gabriel in their top 5. And I'd love to be, you know, maybe the only person out there that's really gonna put it on for him. The San Francisco 49ers are getting cleaned out right now in free agency, and we talked about some of the signings when we were doing the part 2 of NFL free agency grades. Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga have signed with the Broncos. Deebo Samuel was traded to the Commanders, which that's not necessarily much of a clean out there, if you ask me. They released the fullback Kyle Juszczyk with the ever-dying position in the fullback of the NFL. And then Charvarius Ward also signed with the Colts. What are you expecting the Niners to look like next year? Obviously healthy, because that's why they look so rough. But with losing a Greenlaw, a Hufanga, and specifically a Charvarius Ward, I feel like I'm looking at the defense a lot here. What are you going to expect out of San Fran next year, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you lose Deebo Samuel and some of the other guys, but you do, of course, still have Fred Warner, who I think is the most underappreciated linebacker in the league. I don't know why when we talk about the best linebackers in the league, his name isn't coming up consistently. Obviously, he's going to take over the green dot now that Greenlaw is gone, right? You still have the best left tackle in football, arguably, in Trent Williams, right? And so you do still have your 2 best players on the team. You still have Nick Bosa and all that good stuff. But this team's not going to be good next year. That this team is going to have to rely a lot on the success of Brock Purdy. And the one thing that we have seen, which is the one reason why I've said that I'm not going to say that Brock Purdy is a top 15 quarterback or top 10 quarterback in this league, is because Brock Purdy in his tenure in San Francisco has not done anything differently than Jimmy G did. They've been to the same amount of NC championship games. They've been to the same amount of Super Bowls. They've won roughly the same amount of games, similar passing yards, similar touchdown interception ratio, completion percentage, QBR, all that good stuff. The only reason why we talk about Brock Purdy more than and praise him more than we did Jimmy G is because Brock Purdy did it as Mr. Irrelevant. And that's not to slight Brock Purdy, but that is the reality of the situation. Brock Purdy has not proven in games when others around him, the better players around him, are not healthy, he can go out there and win you the football game. So now this is the opportunity for him to put his money where his mouth is. And it's going to be an interesting season. I don't expect this team to be super duper competitive. I don't expect this team to be a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination. I think they'll finish third in the division. I think this is certainly the Seahawks and the Rams division to lose. We'll see them kind of going at it for the most part of the course of the season, and one of those two teams will win the division. I think the days of the San Francisco 49ers being a lock at the top of the conference, a lock at the top of the division, and a lock at the top of the NFL are over, because let's face it, despite the offensive mastermind that is Kyle Shanahan, this football team was run by its defense. This team went as far as its defense would take them, and its defense has lost some key pieces. That's not to say this defense doesn't still have talent, because it does, but you've lost 3 of your best defensive players. You've also lost, whether we like him or not, you're one of your best offensive players as well. Fully healthy, there's going to be a lot to fix, and a lot of this talent is not talent that can be replaced in the draft in year 1. It's talent that will be replaced by these players 2, 3, maybe even 4 years down the line. And so that's unfortunate for San Francisco. So I know you also wanted to throw a record prediction in there. I think they should be able to still win anywhere from 6 to 8 games, maybe on the high end they get to 10. But again, I'm not sure if this is going to be a team that we're going to be talking about towards the end of the season as being a threat to make the playoffs, a threat to be a legitimate championship contender or anything of that nature, because they've lost key pieces on this team on both sides of the ball.
Right. Heavily agreed with you there. For expectations of the 49ers next year, I'll start with the record prediction, really. I think this could be a 9-10 win football team. I think Brock Purdy is going to continue to be tested even more. And like you said, it could take 2, 3, maybe 4 years to replenish this type of talent. Now, it could happen, and realistically probably will happen quicker than that, but maybe I'm the only one out there. I expected Dre Greenlaw to possibly come back, and at least Charvarius Ward or Talanoa Hufanga, because you can really kind of, exchange corner, safety, coverage grades, what they're really doing in the secondary. And, we understand with Robert Saleh coming back, those 3 key pieces were really going to be big. And if we're talking about expectations for the Niners next year, outside of being healthy, to look like without a star linebacker and Dre Greenlaw, without a Talanoa Hufanga, which was one of the better younger safeties for the Niners, now he's going to be in that secondary in Denver, and I think it's going to look great. Charvarius Ward, at plenty of points was looking solid, locking up number 1 wide receivers as a number 1 corner. And when you're missing those, I think it's going to put more stress on your offense if your defense isn't able to perform, because if you're in a lot of shootouts, I don't trust Brock Purdy in a shootout. And now that with Deebo Samuel's gone, apparently Brandon Ayuk is still on the trade block. Like, we have until July to complete free agency. And I know a lot of the damage has already been done now, but there could be more to come down the pipeline. I'm nervous a little bit if I'm a Niners fan, and I understand Deebo getting out and Kyle Juszczyk getting out isn't that big. But, the Niners have been good offensively, but I've always felt like one of their real core strengths, if the offense isn't clicking, is the fact that, there is a Nick Bosa, there is a Fred Warner, there was a Leonard Floyd, there was a Charvarius Ward, a Greenlaw, Hufanga, and now you don't have that. I think they're going to draft well. They usually do. They'll probably get more active in free agency and just in the offseason as things go on. But I think we're going to see a new level of how can Kyle Shanahan adjust. I mean, thankfully, Robert Saleh just came back, but how can Shanahan, how can Purdy, how can CMC adjust offensively, knowing that that's where they specialize on the side of the football, to be able to overcome those deficiencies that the defense, is going to be able to potentially show them, because that's I mean, I'm probably just being prisoner of the moment, but off the top of my head, I can't recall a season in recent memory where the Niners were talked about at the elk that they are, at the tier that they are in the National Football League, and they've lost this caliber of player. Now, yes, Greenlaw was hurt. Now, yes, Hufanga was hurt. Yes, Charvarius Ward was hurt. So maybe, you can scratch everything I'm saying and say, okay, well, Adam, that's exactly why they just got rid of them. Correct. That could be true. But I thought that 2 of these 3 guys, at least defensively, was going to come back, and we'll just have to see how that really plays out for them. Because if they are a 6 to 8 win football team, like you said, Marcus, it's going to be very disappointing to have 2 straight seasons of that. Again, I see them falling in the 9 to 10 win category because I just believe that's the caliber of football team that they really are. I think the front office is great. I think the head coach, the GM, the quarterback, line really lines up. Now, at one point, I do think we start to have to hold Kyle Shanahan to a much higher standard of quarterback play, because how long is he going to get away for his tenure of being with the Niners? Jimmy Garoppolo, an epic, generational, historical, all-time miss with Trey Lance. And then you go to Brock Purdy, which you just so happen to get lucky with the last pick of the draft. Maybe that unfolds in the next couple of seasons. I'm not really sure. I'm one of those out there to where it's like, yeah, Kyle Shanahan is solid, but how long does he continue to get away with building a stacked roster and not even having, on a good day, a top 12 quarterback? Like, yes, Purdy and, Jimmy G at times could fall into that, but they're not game changers. There's a reason we call them game managers. There's a reason that you're not expecting them to beat you with their arm. And I think possibly this season, because of the defensive players departing, we could see some of that really come forward to where, like, hey, the offense has got to click. And if it's falling short at the quarterback position with this payday looming for Brock Purdy, which I can't even begin to imagine what he might make, but hey, he's been to a Super Bowl. He's performed when he's needed to. Now, while the roster has been stacked around him, and we hear these comparisons like to Jalen Hurts, I think everybody sitting here will agree that Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. And we've seen Jalen Hurts overcome the rosters before he's had them at this point to still play solid. Whether it was playoffs or Super Bowl or not is a different story. We're talking about what's on the tape, and I think Purdy's going to have to put some extra special things on tape this season. Now, this is before the draft. This is before the offseason really takes place. This is before free agency ending at the end of July like we know it's going to. So it's going to be an interesting season for the San Francisco 49ers. The Philadelphia Eagles defense is getting absolutely shelled out right now in free agency. Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Isaiah Rodgers, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, Oren Burks are all with new teams. Do you see this defense still being top 5 next season? And if not, top 10, top 12? How are you feeling on this one? Because I'm pretty shocked that a team that was just the youngest defense to win the Super Bowl, and we see this, right? Like, you win the Super Bowl, people are going to come for your players, especially if they're available, like a Kellen Moore, like a TJ Pagnetti, like some of these coaches at the Saints, really brought all into there after making Kellen Moore their head coach. So what do you kind of see unfolding here defensively for Philly, man?
I'm not saying you fall on this boat, Adam. I would hope not anyway. But if you don't think the Philadelphia Eagles are still going to be a top 5 defense in the NFL next year, respectfully, you're an idiot. I don't know how you could not think that. Down the roster, we're still talking about a defensive line that's anchored by Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. We're still talking about they have edge rushers and Nolan Smith, and they just went out and got Josh Uche from Uche, however you say his name. They just got Josh Uche from Kansas City. So we're talking about at the first level up front on the D-line, you have Jalen Carter and you have Jordan Davis. You go on to the edge rushers, you've got Nolan Smith, you have Josh Uche. You go to the linebacking core, you still have Zach Bond, who should have won Defensive Player of the Year, who they just gave the bag, and Nakobe Dean. You get to the secondary, They have undeniably the best 1-2 punch at the cornerback position, certainly the youngest 1-2 punch at quarterback position with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. There we go.
Quinyon Mitchell, yeah.
Names failed me there. My bad, brother. Like, you have talent. So this was the youngest defense in the NFL. All they do was get rid of all their vets, and they're still the youngest defense in the NFL. This is still Howie Roseman we're talking about. Like, this is still going to be a very talented defense. Oh, and by the way, Vic Fangio, who I just will point this out every single time, when Vic Fangio was no longer the head coach of the Denver Broncos, and he got replaced by Sean Payton, I told everyone that would listen that defensively, the Broncos are going to take a step back because you don't lose someone the caliber of Vic Fangio and not take a step back. The Broncos year 1 under Sean Payton was good, but it wasn't as good as it was the year before. Vic Fangio was
70 points too.
And so as long as they still have Vic Fangio, as long as they still have Jalen Carter, as long as they still have Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith, Josh Uche, who they just brought in, Zach Bond, who they just paid, Nakobe Dean, Cooper DeJean, and Quinyon Mitchell, and Vic Fangio, there's no reason why this can't still be a top 5 defense in the NFL. The talent is there, and this is would the only defense in the National Football League with at least 2 bona fide impact players, and bona fide already superstars or potential superstars at all three levels. There's no other defense in the NFL that can say that. The only defense that had a chance at saying that was San Francisco, and all their players got gutted. So again, I'll say, and I don't think you fall in this boat, Adam, but if you do not think that the Philadelphia Eagles will be a top 5 defense next season when this is the talent that they have and their coordinator is still Vic Fangio, then respectfully, you're an idiot. Because I don't know how you can look at what they have defensively and not think that they'll be able to replicate the success they had just last season.
Yeah, Howie Roseman's still the GM. They still have 8 picks within the first, what is it? Do they have 8 picks in this draft? I think is what someone said. There's no way they have 8 picks in the first
7
round.
or 8.
That doesn't even make sense.
Not
yeah,
in the first
I think
round, but they have 7 or 8 picks.
Right. Yeah, it's 8 picks in this draft, if I'm not mistaken, which is absolutely crazy. I think they have 20 picks within the next 2 or 3 drafts or something like that. So like I've seen a lot of the reports out there, like these guys have some draft capital for sure. And as long as Howie is up there doing what he's doing, like they're always going to be great for talent. Milton Williams going to the Patriots, second best pass rush grade for interior defensive linemen, 19th in the NFL in pressures. So the Eagles do lose some of that. Josh Sweat was 18th in hurries, 21st in total pressures. Isaiah Rodgers was the 20th overall graded corner, 31st in coverage grade out of over 200 corners. CJ Gardner-Johnson, we talked about him earlier. Darius Slay, we talked about him earlier. And even Oren Burks played every single game for the Eagles, and he was a top 15 graded linebacker by PFF as well. Without question, I think this is still going to be a top 5, if not a top 3 defense in the NFL next year, because Vic Fangio has now taken the crown from Steve Spagnuolo, saying, you are no longer the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. I own that title now. I just won a Super Bowl finally in my 37th year of coaching with the youngest defense ever in the NFL with an average age of 26 years old. And yes, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, those are the 4 big ones that really stick out to me, because if you've got 2 people on your line within the top 20, 21 technically of pressures, like you're going to feel that absence. There's no question about it with a solid pass rush grade, with being up there in hurries, like it's going to be major. But I still think, because when you look at Jalix Hunt, when you look at Moro Ojomo, when you look at Keely Ringo, who is also still a Bulldog, you've still got Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, you've still got Nolan Smith, you still not Nakobe Dean. Like these guys are still pretty loaded defensively, but it doesn't mean that you won't feel the loss of these guys here. And I think this is just going to continue to be a testament of what Howie Roseman is able to do, what Vic Fangio. I was like, what is that? My window's open. What Howie Roseman's able to do, what Vic Fangio is able to do. And it's just going to show you more and more the type of coach that they actually are. And especially with Nick Sirianni as well. Do you see this impacting their chances to repeat as champions? Or do you feel like it kind of falls into the first question, like the defense won't change that much? There's a good chance they'll be back in the Super Bowl next year.
No, I think the only thing that will impact their chances of making it back to the Super Bowl will be the offensive coordinator situation. If I'm not mistaken, Jalen Hurts is about to enter his 5th year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
6th, I think, technically.
His 5th or 6th year in the league, and he's going to be on his 5th or 6th offensive coordinator. Jalen Hurts has not had the same coordinator in back-to-back years, I don't think, at all in his career. Right. That would be the only thing I think that would hinder the Eagles' ability to at least get back to the Super Bowl. I'm not going to say they're going to go back-to-back, not because I don't think they can, just because I think we've lived in a world where we've seen the Kansas City Chiefs play in just about every Super Bowl we've seen them play in every Super Bowl except for 2 since Mahomes has been the starter. And I think we're just expecting this to be the case for the Eagles. I certainly think they can get back, but anything can happen, right? Like there are other teams in the NFC that at least seem to be gearing up for that. I would say the only 2 teams that could prevent them from getting back are the Lions and the Commanders, more so the Commanders than the Lions, just because the Commanders are in their own division. But there's nothing that the Commanders have really done this offseason that has really made me take a look and say, wow, they've closed that gap a bit more there. I definitely think they're still the favorites to come out of the NFC. I think they should still be the favorites to make it to the Super Bowl for the NFC reps of the conference. Whether or not they win the Super Bowl, though, will be dependent upon who they face on the other side. I'd be really interesting to see a matchup against the Bills, because I think the Bills have got a little bit better defensively, as we talked at the top of the show. I would be interesting to see the matchup against a team like the Ravens, who have had a pretty solid team, but just can't seem to get over the hump because of Lamar Jackson. And of course, I might be the only person in America that wants it, but I would like to see them match up against the Chiefs one more time, because I would like to see
between the Chiefs and the Eagles.
I'd like to see how the Chiefs.
So the Eagles can spank that ass.
They did. I mean, I think the reason why the Eagles were able to dominate so much is because not only because they improved the roster, because they learned from their mistakes from the previous outing 2 years ago. So it'd be interesting now to see if the Chiefs, if they were to meet again for the third time in 4 years in the big game, if the Chiefs could make that adjustment as well. But no, I'm not going to say that they're going to, win it all again next year, just because I very rarely have I ever in the 5 years that I've been doing this almost, definitively said we'll see a back-to-back champion. But I definitely think that they can be back-to-back NFC champions and make it back to the Super Bowl. They're undeniably the best team in the conference for sure.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, a lot of the same points that I made with them being a top 5 defense. Still, like, Vic Fangio's still there. They've still got a ton of defensive talent. And if anything, it's just more of a next man up mentality. Like, okay, Vic, because when Vic came in, he said, it's not y'all's fault that you don't work as hard as you need to. It's not, because you only know how to bring talent in daily schedules to the table. But until you have the discipline, until you have the routines, until you have the accountability in the leadership, being a leader of men in the locker room with a lot of those players coming from a championship winning team like the Georgia Bulldogs, we're going to get to see a major improvement from Vic Fangio, and not even an improvement, but just a further testament of his leadership abilities and how he's able to coach up a lot of these younger guys that, got some minimum snaps and, just really see what they were able to do. So I don't think it changes the, as much as I might come out here with these shorts and say that their Super Bowl chances have taken yet another hit, because in reality they have, because we don't know what's going to happen yet, because we know what a Milton, what a Slay, what a CJ, what a Josh was for this team. That's 4 pivotal players that are gone. All 4 of those guys were making plays in the Super Bowl. I mean, Josh Sweat was arguably your Super Bowl MVP. I still think it was Jalen Alexander Hurts all day and twice on Sunday, but we heard people saying could have been a co-MVP for the defense. You could have given it to Josh Sweat. Like, however you wanted to cut the cake, right? But it's going to be great to see the Eagles next year still be in that same spot, still be that top 3, top 5 defense. And, yes, their chances have been impacted to repeat, but you've still got Fangio there. You still got a great front office. Howie Roseman is an absolute freak. And just our luck, the Eagles are going to land some awesome defensive player that has slipped down the board, because all 31 teams in front of them are just ignorant potentially when it comes to the fact of what this player is going to be for Philly. And when you have a Vic Fangio, it's like a cheat code, right? I mean, if only Vic Fangio could coach quarterbacks, right, Marcus? If only he was a damn quarterback coach, Anthony Richardson would probably already be a star, right? I mean, it's just crazy the way he's able to really coach up these guys. Hope you guys are able to catch that analogy. All right, Marcus, I'm going to let you pop out of here. But as always, thank you for joining the show. It's always a great in-depth pod when we're able to jump into it together. Plug yourself before you leave and let the people know what's going on.
Oh, absolutely, man. You guys can always feel free to follow me on Instagram at marcus.talks.sports. That's where I do most of my postings, where most of my stuff is. You can also follow me and my guy Martin Stories of Basketball Society on Instagram at protectourqueens_ as well. That's where all of my women's basketball stuff is. We will be having a show on Monday, the day after Selection Sunday. We'll be doing it Monday morning, so definitely want to tap in with us there as well. Always a pleasure to hop on with you, Adam, and you enjoy the rest of the night, my guy.
Yeah, man. You too. Absolutely. Y'all see the tag right there at the bottom, marcus.talks.sports, and then Protect Our Queens for WNBA, women's college basketball as well. Seriously, guys, if y'all are not tapped in with a content creator who is actually dedicated to women's sports, specifically women's basketball for the NBA and college basketball, this is your guy. Go check him out. He's got me tapped in when I couldn't even really care less about the sport of basketball. We know how undercovered and underappreciated women's basketball is. So Marcus is your guy to check it out. Man, as always, I appreciate you. You're one of the best to have on the show, and we're not going to stop doing it, man. I'll see you next time, okay?
All right, appreciate you, man. You have a good night.
Yes, sir. Have a good weekend. All right. This is episode 97 of the NFL with AJL. I appreciate everybody jumping into the show tonight, because you could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're right here tapped in with me on the show. And for that, as always, I'm forever grateful. I hope you've had a great March as well. Hope you had a great weekend plan that's coming up, because Easter is around the corner. The NFL draft is in a month, and life is just going to continue to roll on. But before we get the rest of the show going on the second half, where we hit the Who Dat corner, again, episode 97 of the NFL with AJL. Y'all please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you may be watching. Subscribe on YouTube. Get in the chat as well. Get in the comments. I love to interact with you while the show's going on. I'm not too busy here to type back or pop your comment up on the screen. Hit the bell so you never miss any type of post, whether we're live, whether it's a medium form clip, whether it's a YouTube short that we've been rolling out there as well. And then, as always, the QR code in the corner of your screen. It's also linked down in the description. We'll give you every bit of social media and podcast content, because if you can't find find me, I promise you are simply not looking hard enough. And as always, we're sponsored by Buy and Sell with AJL for all your worldwide professional real estate needs, looking to buy a home, sell a home, or invest in real estate. This is the real estate team that you need to be working with. You can get on their monthly neighborhood market reports. You can also come to their monthly real estate meetups as well that they host in the South Atlanta area. Preparation for a buyer, preparation for a seller, for an investor. It was a great topic the other day of how to prepare for the spring market, and they actually analyzed a house flip live within the group. They do some trivia, they do some networking. It is a great time to check it out. It's at Lion Creek Brewery in Peachtree City. Contact at Buy and Sell with AJL on social media if you would like to get into the Buy and Sell with AJL community and the real estate meetup. And we have the HyperX sponsorship live and active for you guys. Head over to hyperx.com if you're looking to buy a microphone, if you're looking to buy a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, a set of headphones, really a lot of things for gaming, for podcasting equipment. Hyperx.com is the website that you need to head over to. Use my code AJL at checkout for 15% off of your entire purchase. If I had to recommend it, they have a nice podcast bundle which comes with the headphones and it comes with the microphone. I just use an AirPod here to have the headphones tapped in, and honestly, when I don't have a guest on the show, then it's just me. Then I don't have any headphones in because I know how the audio sounds before we get things rolling. But please, guys, I would love you forever if you head over to hyperx.com. Use code AJL for 15% off at checkout as well. You can hit us with the super chat, the super thanks, the super like on YouTube. If you want to donate to the show monetarily, no donation is too big or too small. You can hit me up on social media. I can hook you up with the payment forms there so we can go ahead and get things rolling for your endorsement of the show. Love you guys, need you guys, and let's continue episode 97 as we jump right into the Who Dat Corner, where we give you the weekly New Orleans Saints updates. And we have some new free agency moves here. Probably my favorite one is Justin Reid is signed by the New Orleans Saints from the Kansas City Chiefs. And Justin Reid is a very solid corner in this league, 6'1", 207 pounds, 28 years old. And he comes from the Texans over to the Chiefs, now with the New Orleans Saints, the same exact path that the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu took. He's now walking into his third or fourth season, with us, which is crazy enough to think about. And when you look at Justin Reid here, he was actually a overall grade of 77, which was 20th out of 171 safeties in the league. He had 2 interceptions as well, and overall was just a very solid corner. He's won a couple of Super Bowls with the Chiefs, comes from a high-level elite winning organization with Andy Reid running that, with Steve Spagnuolo giving him some of that tutelage. Obviously, you have Brandon Staley as our new defensive coordinator as well. And Justin Reid grades at a 76, which is 31st out of those 171 safeties for run defense grade. And then his coverage grade is elite, 12th in the league at 77.4, again, out of 171 safeties. He was 7th in pass rush snaps for safeties with 45. He was 7th in stops for safeties with 32 as well. 27th in pass breakups, 19th in total pressures, 7th in receptions allowed with only 44. And he only had 8 missed tackles as well. So this guy is someone who knows his assignments, knows his coverages, gets his players on the ground when it comes time to tackling them, and overall is that veteran leader. And I think him and Tyrann Mathieu are going to be kind of a slept-on not wide receiver. They're going to be locking up wide receivers. They're going to be a slept-on safety duo / tandem in the NFL. It's great. Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, if only we still had a Debo and Lattimore. Now we got Justin Reid and Honey Badger. And again, Reid and Honey Badger have played together before, and Justin Reid actually replaced Honey Badger when he came over to the New Orleans Saints just a couple of seasons ago, and now they are going to be on the same team. Isaac Yiadom comes back to us. Yiadom, however you want to pronounce his name, he comes back to us. He was with the he went to the Niners, correct? Yeah, he went to the Niners. Now he's back. Before he came to us the prior season, he was with the Denver Broncos. Now going over to the Niners, he didn't look very good. He didn't look very good at all. He's 29 years old now. He had a 59 overall grade, which is 129th out of 223 corners as well. A 55 coverage grade, which is 152nd out of 223 corners. Did have a solid run defense grade at 76, which he came in at 34th there. So it's very rough to see how he had that fall off as a Kansas City Chief. Of course, it kind of makes me feel happy as a New Orleans Saint that Thank God we didn't have another Trey Hendrickson, Caden Ellis, Zach Bond, CJ Gardner-Johnson leave us and go win a championship, go be in Defensive Player of the Year votings like we saw with a couple of those players I just mentioned. And I think a lot of that with Yiadom last year was the fact that the Niners were so beat up defensively. And I think he's going to come back with the Saints and really be solid as his corner for us, because he played some great football with us. I mean, at one point in the league, he had the most pass breakups as a corner for the Saints. He had a forced fumble last year, which is very solid. But when you start to dig into some of the deeper numbers as well, he just doesn't have really a whole lot of production. And a lot of that was because of how injured the Niners were last year. But I think that's going to change. I think Yiadom is actually going to be really solid. Brandon Staley, I want to say, was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos in 2020. Yiadom was over there with him at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Marquez Valdes-Scantling did, and MVS for short, did end up going to the Seattle Seahawks. Really hated to lose him. He was a wide receiver that was starting to come around some. The relationship that he was building with Derek Carr was very solid. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but outside of last season, MVS has been an MVP magnet because every quarterback he's played with over the last 5 or 6 years, now a lot of that is Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, he was helping them win MVP. I'm going to miss the veteran leadership from MVS. I'm just going to miss the health and the actual body from MVS, since we know that Chris Olave is not a very healthy, reliable, durable wide receiver one when it comes time to being durable more than anything. We know that he can be a reliable receiver. And then Rashid Shaheed coming off injury as well. So I would have loved to see MVS back to build a further relationship with Derek Carr, as much as I might not want him as my quarterback on this team. It is what it is. We did sign Jonah Williams from the Lions. I think that's what I was mentioning here, is Brandon Staley actually coached up Jonah Williams when he was with a previous team. So there is a connection there, but Jonah Williams does not have very good grades when it comes to PFF. And, overall, I don't think he's going to be much of a needle mover, but he does have that relationship with Brandon Staley. We do bring in Jack Stoll from the Eagles, who is mainly a run blocking tight end, but, TJ Paganetti, who we got from the Eagles, and then also, Kellen Moore actually worked alongside Jack Stoll over in Philadelphia. So there is going to be some relationship there. Again, I don't think it's a big needle mover. Gumsmack and Mick, our GM, did say that we were going to go and sign a couple of tight ends. We stupidly re-signed Juwan Johnson to almost at a 10-year, $30 million deal. That would be insulting. To a 3-year, $30 million deal. I'm over the prototype tight end, wide receiver, Timu pass catcher that we have in Juwan Johnson. And I'm not looking to insult the guy whatsoever, but he is not a solid player in our offensive scheme. And Mick said we were going to go out and sign 2 tight ends. We brought back Juwan horribly, and we went and got Jack Stoll. So thank you, Mick. That probably takes Tyler Warren off the table, or another tight end that we would maybe want to have. Will Clapp comes back over. Not the greatest offensive lineman in the league. Maybe he could provide something for us, but again, not a real needle mover there. And then we tried to make a run at Charvarius Ward, which I really do appreciate, because Charvarius, before last season was one of the better corners in the league. You heard me talk about it multiple times on the show. And then we're rumored to be in play for Dallas Goedert and potentially Brandon Cooks as well. We actually drafted Brandon Cooks back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, with our first round pick. Hated that we actually moved off of him, because once he went to the Rams, got traded to the Texans, to the Cowboys, the record amount of trades that Brandon Cooks has had. He just wasn't the same wide receiver as he was with the Saints. And then I would absolutely love if we were able to actually have a chance at Dallas Goedert. I don't really see that happening, but if we were able to make that happen, I think it's really great, because, it's more than likely not going to happen again because of Jack Stoll, because of Juwan Johnson, but Dallas Goedert would make a great relationship with our quarterback and Derek Carr, provide us a weapon on offense to where we can really get some of these things moving along to become more effective offensively. And with Kellen Moore working with him in the past season, with Kellen Moore being our new head coach, with Kellen Moore calling plays, going to have the offense performing at a high level, hopefully, it would be great to have Dallas Goedert within the mix. As of March 14th, today that I'm recording this, the New Orleans Saints are officially under the salary cap by $18.6 million. Now, we had to restructure Carl Granderson. We had to restructure Kalen Saunders, Cesar Ruiz, Derek Carr, Demario Davis, Pete Warner, Eric McCoy. Half the damn roster had to restructure, right? Tyrann Mathieu signed a new contract worth up to $7.2 million in incentives, which I'm not freaking out about Tyrann Mathieu coming back. Like, I love that guy as a player, and I'm glad that he's able to be back home playing in his own backyard, essentially. We extended Nathan Shepard, not really sure why, because now that we've got Granderson, We've got Chase Young. We've got Brian Bursey. We've got Devon Godshaw. Like, we have a solid defensive line now to where if they are coached up well by Brandon Staley, I just don't think we need Nathan Shepard, but whatever. We probably need bodies. We need depth. Hopefully we don't have to see too much playing time from him, but it is what it is. The big point of getting into this topic is it just sucks yet again because this team clearly thinks the roster we had last season, along with some decent additions in Justin Reid, Isaac Yiadom, Devon Godshaw, is the answer in how we can actually compete. And that injuries were the big reason why we weren't good. And I don't know how you can look beyond the results, and just because you're doing things that aren't working doesn't mean you're not doing the right thing. I understand the thing of persistence and perseverance and dedication and getting through adversity and getting to the end of the tunnel and, really be holding the moment in front of you. But I don't know how much longer an NFL franchise, and look, we don't know what they do internally, right? But they see social media. They hear the fans. There's got to be somebody in that building. Nick Underhill, I know, is one of them, but someone in the higher ups that understands the buffoonery that is actually being performed right now with the New Orleans Saints, because it's not injuries. It's your players. It's the bad contracts. It's the aging veterans, which, hey, Cam Jordan comes back. Super glad. Had no doubt he was going to, I never had a doubt that Cam was going to be a Saint for life. I never did. I really never did. So I'd love to see him come back. Production, not great. Tyrann Mathieu, good. Contract and production, maybe questionable, right? Those guys I would keep. I would keep DeMario, and you might think it's contradictory to say because, Adam, shell out the bad contracts, make sure that you can get everybody out of there. While that is true, those guys still provide veteran leadership, a presence to coach up younger players, and even some production still left on the field. I mean, thank God we retooled coaching-wise. I'm glad we went and pulled a lot of Super Bowl winners from the staff of the Eagles, and I'm glad that we have Kellen Moore as a young offensive coach outside of the building who's got experience and who is a proven winner everywhere he's been outside of Los Angeles. When Justin Herbert was hurt and he had Easton Stick as his quarterback. I mean, let's just call it what it is. We're doing all this damn restructuring just to go and kick money into future years, swipe our little credit card again, just to sign Jawan Johnson, Jack Stoll, Will Clapp. Now, I'm okay with the Chase Young, the Justin Reid, the Isaac Yiadom, the Devon Godshaw, but we let Paulson Adebo walk. We let Will Harris walk. And instead of just blowing it up like we should have when Drew Brees retired and just eat all this dead money, suck badly, have no talent, get a top pick for a quarterback, we're going to run it back. We're going to do the same thing with aging players and a mediocre roster on awful restructured contracts when the money's kicked into the future with the hopes to compete. No damn wonder Sean Payton wanted to leave 1 year after Drew Brees retired, because he knew that Brees was kind of his saving grace. He was his voice of reason. Mick probably listened to everything that Drew Christopher Brees said. And Drew Christopher Brees said everything that Sean Payton probably resonated. Neither of them exists without the other. You can say what you want. Oh, look at Sean Payton still doing it now. Bro had to retire to get it right after one of the best NFL quarterbacks of all time retired. And because one of the worst general managers this league has ever seen, and he's being an elite loser ever since Payton and Brees has left, that's what he had to recover from. And the multiple playoff heartbreaks as well. Just our luck, we're finally going to blow it up in a year and have a slew of draft picks and one of the historically weak draft classes. I mean, knowing us, honestly, that's how the New Orleans Saints are going to have it play out. And in this time, I don't know if y'all saw the clip I posted the other day about when I said the Saints would get better after Drew Brees retired and it would keep the Super Bowl window open and we needed a quarterback to push the ball down the field. I'm genuinely sorry, Drew Brees and Sean Payton, that I ever muttered those words. I'm sorry to my podcast fans on Petty Sports and What Off Season and here on the NFL with AJL that actually had to witness and hear an experienced individual like me that has watched football for 20 years and covered it now for about 4 to 5 actually come out and say something like that, because this just reminds me of 2021. $100 million over the cap. A lot of key players are no longer Saints due to the same strategy we're using now of restructuring. Not only did Drew Brees retire, we lost Emmanuel Sanders to the Bills because we couldn't afford him. We lost Jared Cook to the Chargers because of money. Sheldon Rankins to the Jets. Malcolm Brown to the Jaguars. Trey Hendrickson to the Bengals. Alex Anzalone to the Lions. Janoris Jenkins to the Titans. Thomas Morstead to the Jets. Now, you might think, Adam, why are you throwing around names possibly like Malcolm Brown, Sheldon Rankins, Janoris Jenkins, Thomas Morstead? Because those guys had an impact. And if you've been watching New Orleans Saints football, you understand what they were able to do for us in certain moments. That's why I'm saying it. Because what's going to happen? Oh, I know what happened. In 2022, we turned around and lost Quan Alexander, Marcus Williams, and Teron Armstead. Now, Teron Armstead hasn't been healthy since he's left here, and Marcus Williams is still a solid safety in the league with the Ravens. But it's just coming down to it again, to where you have to eat the dead money. You have to embrace the suck. You have to be bad. Because you're just going to keep kicking it into future years. And then eventually 2021 is going to happen all over again, and you're going to scrape the roster and be even worse. I think at least the talent position that we're in right now has us looking better than after 2021 did, because there is a Reid, a Yiadom, a Godchow, there is a Chase Young, there is a Pete Warner, there is DeMario still, there is a Carl Granderson, there is a Brian Bresee. So, we're not necessarily talent stricken, but for the faith of the rebuild, we should be, because we're just going to fall into that 6 to 8 win category. And God forbid we win even more. We're going to have to give up draft capital that we don't really have in the grand scheme of things, because we need it to develop the team. And we're going to throw it for a top pick when you could have just ate the dead money and went on your way. You could have just ate the dead money and went on your way, and just have it be 2021 all over again. But again, the Saints were $100 million over the cap in 2021. I know we were only about $60 million over the cap this year, but it is what it is. Derek Carr wanted to test the NFL free agent market, and the Saints did not entertain the idea. At first glance, that pisses you off as a Saints fan, doesn't it? Falcons fans are probably laughing to the bank. It's okay. You still got to pay Kirk. We got to pay Derek. The beef is even, right? But there is bad blood between Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. You had Derek Carr cussing players out on the field. I get it, the accountability, the competitiveness. He said he wasn't taking a pay cut. He was a no-show at Super Bowl week in your city where it is being hosted, a record time. Everybody loves it here. People are on social media saying the Super Bowl should be held here. And Derek Carr's nowhere to be seen. He hasn't even been in the state since the offseason started, and we haven't been in the playoffs. We never went, obviously. The only appearance of Derek Carr at Mardi Gras was the float that fans had made about him, making fun of him being the quarterback of this team. The relationship is all but over. And the way that the Saints restructured the contract, yes, Derek Carr, we will be able to post June 1 release him, I think, next season and get about $40 million of the contract back. Or someone could come in, get Derek Carr. We still face a $62.8 million hit against the cap, which is why we couldn't release him, because we were already $60 million over the cap. Because if we would have released Carr, it literally would have been either be in cap hell by $120 million, or you restructure him and save $31 million and kick him into future years and still have him be your quarterback. So it was essentially anywhere from a it was really a $90 million cap hit swing, or $90 million swing for the team. The Saints restructured him without having to ask him, and that's how his contract was written. So he's going to get his $100 million guaranteed either freaking way. But no team wanted to take on this contract. No team wanted to take on this quarterback. And again, Derek Carr made it known loud and clear he was not taking a pay cut. And that's what did it in right there. So I kind of want to say sorry to the Saints for saying that you should have released him and ate the dead money, because you financially might not have been able to compete next year. You have to become salary cap compliant by the time free agency starts. But also in the same breath, eat the dead money and move on. The relationship is so extremely broken. So extremely broken. And I would be less pissed if you moved on now, shell out the roster, everybody is gone. And even if you trade the house, move up to number 1 for Cam or Shador, and they are the biggest bust in NFL history, I'm still not as pissed as you hanging on to this aging roster with bad contracts, because at least you tried. But you're not trying. You're continuing to thrive in mediocrity. You're continuing to use the same thing that we've done for the last 10 years, but Drew Brees and Sean Payton ain't here no more. So tell me how it's going to work, Mick. As you like to do at the table, tell me how, Mick. I'd love to know. That was episode 97 of the NFL with AJL. I appreciate everybody jumping into the show tonight, because you could have been anywhere else in the world and you were right here tapped in with me on the show as we just finished out the Who Dat Corner. As always, please make sure to like and share the stream wherever you may be watching. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell so you never miss a post. That QR code at NFL with AJL. There we go. We'll give you every bit of social media and podcast content. If you can't find me, you're simply not looking hard enough. We will be back on Tuesday with episode 98. I love you guys. I need you guys, and I will see y'all in the next.